1, 2, 3, 4.
My grandfather came home one day from a long road trip.
My mum tells me stories that I don't remember.
I was actually mowing my lawn with my dad.
There was an insectivore bat that flew into our lounge room.
And dumped a potato sack at the table.
Me as a little kid, like a toddler, picking up lizards and nursing them and patting them and saying things like, "You'll get better," things like that.
And there was the needle-tailed swifts were flying through the air.
And my sister and I opened the sack to find an eastern grey kangaroo in there.
And we watched a pair of peregrine falcons work the flock for about 10 minutes and then finally take one out.
And I remember everyone in our family screaming. And I was like, I love it.
The kangaroo lived with us for about 2 years at the property, and we spent so much time spying on it and following it around, and I fell in love with wildlife from that day.
Dad's like, "Well, you'll never forget that, will you?" And I was like, "No." And I really just started looking more, reading up on it.
I remember that experience so much because it just brightened up my world, this little insectivore bat, and I was like, it is the weirdest thing I've ever seen in my life.
So things I don't remember, but yeah, it's just always been in me.
When we went on long trips, if there was birds hit on the side of the road, he always stopped, every single time. So we often would have like gallards in the car, taking them to specific vets along the way. And Mum was always like, "Great, we've got another bird in the car." So happy about this.
And I always wanted to have that relationship with nature and with animals, and from there I became a wildlife carer as soon as I was able.
Went into the zookeeping industry, and as a teenager I wanted to get as much experience as I could, so I joined wildcare and did rescues. As soon as I got my licence, I was driving animals to hospital and back again and things like that. So it's just always, I haven't known any different.
From that point I was just like, I need to know everything about those birds.
You do your orientation, then your first aid and your orphan mammals, and then from there whatever species you wish to care for. So I went straight into possums and gliders and never looked back.
If an animal comes into care, or if an animal has to be rescued, it's because everything else has failed. We've failed that animal in every other way. We've destroyed habitat, we've been irresponsible with our cats and dogs.
It was a koala that I was called out to assist in a rescue, and she'd been hit by a car, and she was actually just too injured and too depleted to actually come down the tree.
We've done things that mean that that animal's not safe anymore, and it's come into care for that reason, and I find that really difficult as a wildlife carer.
They're coming to you at their last hurrah. You know, wildlife they're tough. They try and put on a brave face for their whole life. So yeah, that's the hardest part.
I had a few people helping me, and we bent it over, and I just grabbed her at the end. And one of the trauma carers, they're just amazing, special people.
Unfortunately, you see a lot of wildlife that have been really hard done by.
With the trauma caring, it's always pretty devastating, and sometimes, well, actually pretty much every time I do it, I think, why am I doing this? Because it's really hard.
It'll give you the thumbs up or the thumbs down whether it's got a chance, and it's the harsh truth.
And I held her while she was euthanized, and that actually broke my heart because she just suffered so much, and they're disappearing, and it was a beautiful, perfect animal that could have kept going, but it's just was in the wrong place, and people just go a little bit too fast sometimes.
You just keep going because you know that if you weren't there to do it, that there might not be someone else, and you just can't leave those animals to suffer.
Yeah, that was a really hard moment. I will always think the most rewarding part of being a wildlife carer is the release. Always. It never gets boring. There is not a time that my heart doesn't just feel amazing when I watch them go, because they always look back, and I just really believe that that's them looking back and saying, "Thank you for giving me a second chance."
The wedgie had been hanging around the chook pen, and it was a very small fracture. It wasn't a complete fracture of the bone. We went down and caught it because the people reported it. So I did spend 6 months rehabbing it, and I used to strap food to that and just drag it through the paddock and make it fly to that. So it became a pretty close part of me. Like, I was working it every day, and then eventually, yeah, it was just that day I just was like, yeah, it's ready to go. You just knew. You know, with all the animals when they want to go. This one, she just took off and she went straight up and she disappeared over the top of Moobore Hill. She came back 2 hours later with Mum and Dad over the top. Yeah, it made the front page of the local newspaper. Like, it was really cool. That was probably one of the best achievements I've done through Tweed Valley. So yeah, that was a proud one.
My son and I cared for a tawny frogmouth together. It only needed short-term care, so we had it for 2 weeks. So we drove out and it was easy. As soon as we got out the car, the tawny made some vocalizations and we immediately heard the family in the trees respond. We could see the tawny frogmouth getting really anxious and agitated and it wanted to go. So this bird turned its head and its body to its family, and before it took off, it just turned around one last time and it leant its head forward in and it just touched me before it flew away. And I just believe that it was a conscious movement to say thank you. And I believe that animals have that ability to be grateful.
She was a brush-tailed possum. She was released and everything went really, really well. There was about 8 years that I experienced her. So she lived for quite a while in the wild and she would come down every single time she had a baby. Literally just to show me. It was just like, look what I've done. And I was like, I'm a grandma again, I'm so excited.
Even though the role itself is rewarding and it's wonderful to release animals back into the wild, the fact is that they shouldn't come into care in the first place.
I think that it's great to be a wildlife carer. I think it's really great to be hands-on, but I think awareness is absolutely everything. If we're aware of what we're doing and the impact that we're having, then it has a ripple effect.
Australia has the highest rate of mammal extinctions in the world, and people don't know that. We've lost so many things and it's just so sad.
You know, still logging in some of those most pristine forests and they're still going ahead.
And there's animals that I wish I could have been around to see, and I'm never going to get to see them, but I need to make sure that my little guy is going to get to see these animals because we just can't lose them, they're too precious.
If we all banded together as a community and built habitat gardens,
Just knowing what trees to plant in your yard to provide food for the wildlife.
if we kept our cats and dogs restrained, if we did all those things, drive slowly on the roads at night, those animals wouldn't be coming into care at the rate that they're coming in.
It's just really important to have that awareness that we all can live in harmony together. We just have to be more mindful of our actions.